The first is an injury, and the commonest injury is whiplash. Okay, so whiplash, and in fact they did a fascinating study in Israel where they found that 22% of people in their study who'd had a serious whiplash injury ended up with the pain starting here and then it just spread everywhere. So whiplash seems like for some reason this being up close to your head and your neck makes it more likely as compared with 2% of the population, which is again, if they just took a similar group. So that makes you 10 times more likely, but it could be some other kind of injury. Another thing is a serious illness. Serious illness, and this is a serious illness that often if you end up in intensive care, so you become very, very ill and you catch something and it all turns to custard and you end up in intensive care. Included in this is major operations. So you go in and you're going to have your hip done and it all goes bad and you end up very ill and as you're starting to get better, you find that yes, you're going to live, but now I'm sore everywhere and there are a whole lot of other symptoms that come. So second. The third is certain viruses, viral illnesses. So if you get glandular fever, or if you get this nasty thing that you get in Ross River fever, or if you get Lyme disease, and there are these series of awful things that you don't want to get. When you get over it, you're left with everything hurts. So the viral illnesses. Then there's this really fascinating group. So someone mentioned Stu Muriel who's talked about stress. Stress is a biggie. Stress is a big. We've just gone through a big bump in fibromyalgia. Big. No, it's actually fascinating. It's not. No, when I say we, I mean the world. I'm being broader because it's really fascinating. Christchurch not.
Yes.
It's natural disasters don't, and in fact often natural disasters seem to bring out the best in people. But it's war. So the Gulf War veterans, and in fact when you go back to the Second World War veterans, they all had this huge stress in their life and awful things happening, and when they returned, the incidence of fibromyalgia in the Gulf War veterans is 30 to 40%. Wow. And of course they come back, now you've done your duty, now get off into the world, and they can't. So, and it's just, this is the first time it's been truly recognized that in fact the underlying problem with these men and women is the fibromyalgia process. So yes.
Stress in childhood, would that cause it? Because, but then you don't get it till like years later?
The answer is that you may have physical abuse, sexual abuse, and the question is, when is it going to turn on? That is completely individual. It will occur uniquely, and it will depend on what's happening in your life and what your mind and your body do. So it can pop up at any stage, and it may be that you've got the genes, and it may be that you've had some abuse as a child, you got over it, but then you caught an illness, or you had an injury, or something happened, marriage broke up, and I mean, you just look at the whole of life, and then ping, this thing turns on. Okay, so you can have this, and also work. If you're doing a job putting widgets, you're working in a line and you're doing repetitive work, and you start getting occupational RSI, you start getting pain in your arm, you have a much higher risk of that thing turning into just suddenly it all just starts spreading. So, but often it'll come out of the blue. Yes.
So, just for me, because you say about the hereditary thing, I want to have kids.
Yes.
But I don't want to have kids and pass stuff on.
Yes. I think
So, but just listen to this, but it could happen anyway.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
This is
naturally,
look,
yeah.
there are certain types of genetic diseases, or diseases where there is a genetic problem, where you have to go and get counselling. You know, this is there's a disease where it's the sort of thing you see on close up, where you know you've got this child who's going to, and that's passed through the gene. For that you need to absolutely make a big decision whether you want to have a child and so on. Fibromyalgia isn't like that. You have your kids have an 8 times higher risk, but the risk is only 1% or 2%, so that makes it maybe 16. So they have an 80% chance of not having fibromyalgia.
And then they could probably get it anyway if they have an accident or
Exactly. So it's not a reason not to have children. Yes.
Well, you're in more danger every time you go on the roads and just about any.
Spot on. That's right. And you know, the whole of life is managing risk. And that's what I always say, is as I use exactly that. That's a perfect example, is that we want to go from A to B. You get in your car, you go out, and what you're doing in your own mind is you want to go from A to B, and you're just putting in the fact that I may not get to B, I may end up dead or injured, but you balance the risk in your head and you think, and you just go. And it's the same with all our things that we choose in our life.
The genetic thing,
Yes.
I actually have family relatives with fibromyalgia, but I've got an aunt who was crippled with rheumatoid arthritis.
Yes,
Now, that's the same
No,
gene, is
no,
it?
no.
That would be the...
No, they're completely, absolutely different. But people with rheumatoid arthritis are much, much more likely to end up with fibromyalgia, complicating it. So it's a different process.
I thought it was
completely.
related to
No.
arthritis or something like that.
No, the answer is they occur together, but they are totally different processes. And it's really important to understand that. So we'll come back to that in greater detail. Yes.
Further to that lady's question about
Yes.
the children,
Yes.
I didn't have children because I chose not to for that reason,
Yes.
and for the last 2.
Yes.
But I was just thinking with that lady saying she wants to have children and your answer.
Yes.
For me, if I was young enough to, I mean, I don't want to have them, but anyway. Now, I think to myself, I'm so knackered each day that I find it difficult to look after myself, let alone how would I be able to look after children? But what I'm wondering from you is, would the process of pregnancy and hormones alter that
Yes.
regarding energy levels and whatever, that you would be able to then have energy to look after kids?
The answer is it's totally unpredictable.
Okay.
And sometimes, because pregnancy isn't an illness, it's a
No, but I'm wondering.
it's just an altered state. And in fact, there are a lot of things when you're pregnant which are super. I mean, they're absolutely fabulous. You have a huge blood supply and so on. So, but there are big hormonal changes, and there are other, the emotional and mental changes, and it's unpredictable. Some women with fibromyalgia get a new lease of life. They're fabulous. Some are awful, and it's unpredictable. And one of the causes, things that may set off fibromyalgia, again recognized, is if you have a very traumatic delivery, and again you end up needing blood transfusions and you end up really ill, or if you get postnatal depression, you are, as part of this, may turn on a fibromyalgia process. So it's unpredictable.
So you could have a great pregnancy and feel fantastic, and then afterwards
Be
feel terrible.
Absolutely.
And be worse than you were when you before you got pregnant.
Absolutely. But you feel different. because if you haven't got fibromyalgia, bringing up children is really tiring, traumatic, stressful.
So imagine trying to do it with it.
That's right. Oh, no, I absolutely agree. So let's just talk a bit about how fibromyalgia presents. Okay, so we talked about the pain, but and remember, the pain shifts around. It's severe. It lasts at least 3 months. That's a real key. And it's inexplainable. Is that a proper word? Yeah, difficult to explain. Often the pain does what it does. It doesn't really make sense. And the pain can be of any sort. So pain is like a big generic term like colour. And in colour there's green and red. So pain can be sharp, it can be aching, it can be stabbing, it can be shooting, it can be ripping, and all these are ways we describe the sensation that we... And the pain of fibromyalgia can be all of the above and more. It's any type of pain, so you can't, and it shifts around, as I said. I want to talk about, because if you can understand what I'm going to say now, and if you can't, you must just tell me because I'm not explaining it properly, then you'll actually be able to get into the nub, to the most important thing about fibromyalgia. And this is, I'm going to explain to you how pain works. Because the problem with the pain of fibromyalgia is that your pain system starts malfunctioning. That's the key.